And welcome back, everybody, to the Law and Crime Trial Network. You were just listening to the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings going on right now in Washington, D.C. A very, very interesting morning that got a little bit testy. I want to bring on my guest for the afternoon, Ashley Willcott, who is actually a judge herself. So I love hearing it from a judge's perspective. She's a judge in state court. But, you know, obviously some of the same principles apply. But before we get into some of the questioning from later this morning, let's talk about what happened this morning with Senator Cory Booker and how he said, Ashley, that he was willing to violate the court or the Senate rules. I'm so used to court, but the Senate rules in order to reveal these emails, which I saw the emails and they're nothing burgers. But that aside, what do you think that was all about?
Listen, I think it's wrong, first of all, because the same rules, laws apply to him that would apply to anyone else. If it's confidentiality and confidential documents, then I don't believe he should release them either. What was that all about? I think he termed it as civil disobedience, and he decided he didn't care if it was a violation. He didn't care if he risks getting expulsion from the Senate. He's going to do it anyways. A lot of really just, I think, positioning everybody, wanting everyone to hear their opinion and documents and see what they want them to see, irregardless of what this particular actual Senate committee hearing is about.
And, okay, I want folks to head to our site because we have posted the documents that he was going to release. And like I said, they're nothing burgers. One of them showed that Kavanaugh rejected the use of race or national origin in airport security screening and law enforcement generally in the immediate aftermath of 9/11. There was also one that the New York Times broke where he raised doubt about whether Roe v. Wade was established precedent. That one's a little bit more concerning to pro-abortion folks. However, at the end of the day, these emails, in my view, were not exactly earth-shattering. So the question remains, like you said, was this just really political posturing by Senator Booker in order to make a name for himself? Because he certainly made a splash.
I think definitely, Rachel. I think that's exactly what he's done and accomplished. And so while he knew that he shouldn't have done it, confidentiality prevented it from being done, I think he chose to do it knowing there wasn't any information in there that was really damning or that may come back against him or to really cause big issues for him. So I think a lot of this hearing has been exactly what you said, political posturing, for them to get their personal opinions out and have their say and make everybody listen to what they think, instead of necessarily focusing on what they're there for.
And let's be clear, Ashley, this is political posturing from both sides. We're not just picking on the Democrats here. The Republicans are doing plenty of political posturing as well as they ask those questions because they know their folks at home are watching this and want to make an impression. Okay, we're going to continue to very closely monitor the confirmation hearings. They're going to be back in a few minutes. We're going to take you live when they're back. In the meantime, a really interesting exchange with about Mueller and Kavanaugh when we get back. Stay with us here on the Law and Crime Network. Okay, so what is going on here? He wouldn't give a direct answer. He's being a little shifty. I think he's trying to be very careful because he thinks the senator from California is going to surprise him with something. Ashley Willcott, what do you make of that interaction?
I completely think she was on a fishing expedition, and I think she was trying to find out information she didn't have any knowledge of, but he was cautious because he thought, does she know something? Is there something done? And so he didn't directly respond to the question, which just made it, the confrontation even worse by that senator.
Yeah, I agree. But here's the thing with it. Obviously, I think she was on a bit of a fishing expedition, but why couldn't he just answer the question? You either have talked to other lawyers about the Bob Mueller investigation or you haven't. Like, he could have said something like, yeah, I've talked to some lawyers about it. And it just seemed a little bit shifty the way he answered it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like he was trying to ferret out exactly who works for the firm, but I also don't believe he doesn't know who works for the firm that he knows, right? Attorneys he's talking to, he knows what firm they work for.
Right, and my understanding is, I'm going to Google it right now while we speak, but I don't think that Kasowitz's law firm in D.C. is a huge law firm like some of these other big law firms. I think it's a relatively small one, so not to know that a certain lawyer works there is questionable. But listen, I think he was bracing for a gotcha question by the senator, and so he was thinking that she had something tangible, and he didn't want to say anything where he could get caught in what some might consider a lie.
Right, I agree with you. I don't think she had anything tangible, but I do think that was the game he was playing to try to prevent himself from stepping in it, so to speak.
Okay, let's turn now to the senator from Minnesota, a Democrat. She questions Kavanaugh about what counts as an impeachable offense. Interesting. Wonder why she would do that. Let's take a listen. All right, so Ashley, what do we make of this interaction here? I'm not getting a straight answer from Kavanaugh when the senator from Minnesota is referring back to his article. Now, just so our viewers understand, the article that he wrote several decades ago, I believe it was in the 80s, right, had to do with whether a sitting president could be criminally investigated. Actually, I believe this was in the 90s when he was with Ken Starr. What do you make of his answer?
So I think that he, again, was evasive, and instead of answering the question in a straightforward way, he kind of turned it around and said, oh, as I said previously, and this and that. So I do feel like he was evasive in his answer. What's interesting to me is I can't really determine why he would feel the need to be evasive. I think this goes directly to what some of the political pundits are saying, and that is, hey, this is someone handpicked by the president who is going to be on his side, basically, and favor him if there's any action against the president. And, you know, Kavanaugh said very directly before during these hearings, hey, I am here to apply the law, and that's what I'm going to do on cases before me. And so I think his answer could have been much more straightforward than it was.
Absolutely. And obviously, though, when he was answering the issue about impeachable offense, I think that was a fair answer, that it really is up to Congress, not the Supreme Court, of course, to decide what an impeachable offense is. I mean, that is very long-standing precedent that, you know, the Supreme Court would not get involved in a decision like that. However, like you said, I do think that you're right in that he wasn't answering that question directly. It's an important question, and the stakes couldn't be higher, especially if we see someone like Bob Mueller subpoena Donald Trump. That issue, if he fights it, could very well end up in the Supreme Court. So we're going to continue with our coverage of the Kavanaugh hearings in Washington, D.C. We're going to take you live back there as soon as we have a feed. In the meantime, we're going to review some of the highlights and some of the more testy moments as we continue our coverage here on the Law and Crime Network. Stay with us. So we wanted to wait to bring in Ashley and discuss this till Kavanaugh actually got a chance to answer the question that Dick Durbin was asking him. But the question went on and on and on, Ashley. I think we know where Dick Durbin was going with all of this. Yeah. Repeating some of the same questions he's gotten about the power of an independent counsel, of course, referring to Robert Mueller in this case.
Right. So obviously there was no question, to go directly to your point. There was no question. It was just a whole long dialogue about what he wanted everyone to hear out of his mouth. Now, the thing that's interesting to me, and the thing I struggle with in this, Rachel, is I just heard him say, and these are my words, not his, that basically in the age of Donald Trump as president, is he trying to say that that means presidential power needs to now be defined differently? That's where I felt like he was going with that. So
that's interesting, because it really shouldn't matter who's president. Presidential power is enumerated by the U.S. Constitution, and it's not malleable depending on who's in power. I think, Ashley, as a judge, you'd agree with me on that.
100%, and that's my whole point. The things that they're saying, and specifically that this senator says, leads me to believe that that's the argument, that it should be different because of who the president is, and that is wrong, flat out not what the Constitution provides for.
By the way, I'm just peering over to the other screen, and it looks like Dick Durbin is still asking he is still asking his question to Brett Kavanaugh. So this might be the perfect time for us to take a short break, and maybe on the other side of the break, we will have Kavanaugh answer the question if we know what it is. We'll keep you posted on that. Again, you're watching the Law and Crime Network. We're inside the confirmation hearings in Washington, D.C., and we'll bring you them live in just a few minutes. Stay with us. Wow. Okay, some tense questioning between Senator Durbin and Brett Kavanaugh. You'll remember, folks, that Durbin is the one back in his 2006 confirmation hearings that asked him directly about his involvement in the Bush torture program, and he answered, "Senator, I was not involved and am not involved in the questions about the rules governing detention of combatants, and so I do not have any involvement with that." Ashley Willcott, why wouldn't he answer the question that Durbin was asking him?
I don't know. He never did answer it. And Durbin was very specific and very direct, right? So he said, Rachel, exactly, do you deny the 3 incidents relating to the immigration and detention? That's what I want to know the answer to. And he avoided it. He finally said, well, 2 things. Number 1, the answer I gave then was accurate and correct. So he still never answered the question. And number 2, and I took notes on it, asked for the signing it across my desk on the way to the president's desk. He flat out is refusing to answer those questions. And I think for every one of us watching and listening, that makes it appear as if he is purposely being evasive, and he must have been involved.
Okay, well, here's the little problemo. If he admits that, yes, he was involved, that means his 2006 testimony under oath, under penalty of perjury, is a lie.
Right.
And that's
Absolutely.
a problem for Brett Kavanaugh.
It is the problem, and I think that's why he may be, at least that's the presumption and assumption we all make, is that must be why he's being evasive, because otherwise, why not answer the question directly?
Okay, we're going to take a quick break here, and we're going to see if there's some more questions about this very important issue when we come back after the break. We are covering the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation hearings live in Washington, D.C., we have coverage all day long, so stay with us here on the Law and Crime Network. That was the interaction last night that drew a lot of headlines all this morning and today. And then Ashley Willcott, who's my guest for the afternoon, we had Senator Lee address this with Brett Kavanaugh just a few moments ago. What do you make of that and the fact that Senator Lee was emphasizing the point that this is a huge law firm, and how could he possibly know everyone that works for it?
Well, I think Kavanaugh gave 2 different answers. So we all see she was very patronizing last night when Senator Harris was asking the questions and said, boy, I just asked you that question a moment ago. I'm really surprised you can't remember what the question was. And then Kavanaugh kind of took the same tone and said, I don't know who works there. I want to make sure I haven't spoken to anyone. So then today we see Senator Lee say, hey, it's a big firm, 350 lawyers. Can you remember everybody? No. Do you know the names of the 9 cities in which it has offices? No. But then he follows that and says, have you talked to anyone about the Mueller investigation? I wrote down the question, and the answer specifically provided was no.
Well, there you go. By the way, I looked it up. There's only 7 attorneys in the D.C. office for the Kasowitz law firm. Just an interesting little note. Anyway, we're going to continue monitoring the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation hearings in the U.S. Senate. We'll take you back to Washington, D.C. in just moments. Okay, so that happened this morning, and he did follow up on his word. He released those confidential emails, and they did not say much of anything other than the fact that Kavanaugh rejected in the emails the use of race or national origin in airport security screening. So basically, he rejected racial profiling during airport security screening. Here's the thing, Ashley Willcott, she's my guest this afternoon, also a judge. Corey, I know we've talked about how he's grandstanding and all of that, but he does have one point, which I tend to agree with, which is, why was this kind of email confidential to begin with? There's no possible security reason. I don't know if you got a chance to look at the email. We have it posted on lawandcrime.com. But there really doesn't seem to be any real security reason for why this email would be marked as confidential.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I did get a chance to look at them, but there's an argument, at least that Kavanaugh made in the past, that anything after 9/11 should not be released because it should be confidential, but I don't know that I agree with that.
But that doesn't really matter in the fact that the rules are rules, and that this was a confidential memo, and senators are privileged to see some information because they have security clearances, and they're not supposed to share that information with the public, and that's just what he did anyway. So regardless of the fact that, hey, these emails really don't put our national security at risk, the bottom line is the senator still broke the rules.
Right. He had no right to release that information. I think that's the important part in all of this. Here they are considering someone for the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, and that person they're expecting to uphold the law, yet they want to pick and choose, or this particular senator did, which rules he has to follow and doesn't have to follow. Obviously, all of the rules apply to him. He had no right under the rules to show that information.
Okay, so we are going to switch gears a lot right now. We've been following these confirmation hearings out of D.C., and when we have that feedback live, they're on a lunch break, the senators. When we have that feedback live, we'll take you there. In the meantime, though, there's a lot of other news going on across the country. Let's take a look at some of the other top stories.
Here are today's top crime stories trending on Law&Crime.com and across the country. Christopher Watts, the Colorado man accused of killing his pregnant wife and 2 daughters, was reportedly placed on suicide watch by prison officials. Watts is accused of killing his wife, Shannon, and his 2 daughters, 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Celeste. Watts was placed on close watch protocol in Weld County Jail. Guards are now required to check on him every 5 to 10 minutes. Watts faces 5 counts of first-degree murder and 4 other felony charges.
Please don't let them punish me for trying to stay alive.
The man arrested for allegedly ramming his pickup truck into a Texas news station pleaded for help from local news media. Michael Chadwick Fry is accused of ramming his pickup truck repeatedly and intentionally into the Fox 4 building in Dallas.
I'm mentally challenged, but I tried to do what I could to demand questions to be heard. I just wanted to summon the cavalry and get the power of the people and the media to do their job.
Fry now faces a charge of felony criminal mischief. The family of Odin Lloyd has reportedly settled a wrongful death lawsuit filed against the estate of former NFL player Aaron Hernandez. Hernandez was convicted of first-degree murder for the 2013 killing of Lloyd, but his conviction was vacated after his prison suicide in April of 2017. The terms of the settlement have not been disclosed. Those were today's top crime stories. I'm Anthony Velez for Law and Crime.
All right, some interesting stories going on across the country. I'm here with my guest for the afternoon, Ashley Willcott. Going back to this interesting case that we followed, and we actually streamed live here on the Law and Crime Network, and that was the Aaron Hernandez case. We just got word that Odin Lloyd, which was the victim in the case, has settled the wrongful death lawsuit against the estate of Aaron Hernandez. Is that a big surprise to you?
No, it's not to me at all. I think once we covered the trial, the information that we learned during that trial, it was probably smart on their behalf to go ahead and settle and resolve that.
One of the other interesting facts here in this case, though, that Hernandez's estate has actually filed a lawsuit against the NFL, alleging the league failed to protect Hernandez from the chronic effects of CTE. You know, we've talked a lot about this. He's obviously not one of the first to file such a lawsuit. But what do you make of that, and where things could go with that lawsuit?
Well, you know, I'm not surprised they filed a lawsuit like that. I think it's going to be tried on these specific facts if it goes to trial. I do think the NFL will defend it and take it to trial. I do not foresee them settling because, to be quite frank, in terms of liability of the NFL, that would open up the floodgates, so to speak, and I don't think that they're going to subject themselves to that kind of litigation.
And this certainly was an interesting case. I think all of us were kind of shocked earlier this year when Aaron Hernandez was found dead in his cell. There were many questions surrounding what had happened there. I think the family at first was raising concern of some kind of suspicious activity, but ultimately did concede that he had taken his own life. However, they do blame what had happened to him during his career with the NFL for causing some of these issues. So we're going to continue monitoring that case, the Aaron Hernandez case, and other cases that we're following here on the Law and Crime Network, including The confirmation hearings of Brett Kavanaugh, the man who could be our next Supreme Court justice. We're going to take you back live to that hearing when we have it in just minutes. In the meantime, let's take a quick break. Okay, so this is a transcript reading from the last trial of Stanley Liggins, where the stepfather took the stand and described, discovering what happened, identifying the body of the 9-year-old little girl, but more importantly, describing the relationship between his family and Stanley Liggins, the defendant in this case, because clearly they did know each other. Now, what makes this case especially interesting is there is no DNA that links Stanley Liggins to the crime. Let's bring in Ashley Willcott. What do you make of this case, Ashley? I think it's somewhat of a tough one for prosecutors now, especially without having those live witnesses. Again, many of them are dead or unavailable now.
That's right. So, Rachel, I think it's a difficult case for the prosecution for those very reasons. Number one, the number of years, 28 years that has passed since this crime occurred. Number two, because they don't have a lot of the live witnesses. And so it's very hard to make that testimony impactful or emotional because you don't hear the nuances of what the witness is saying. You don't have the body language of the actual witness. Instead, you have someone simply reading a transcript. The other thing is this case, Rachel, is entirely circumstantial. And so it's a lot to put together a circumstantial case from 28 years ago. You also have a defendant who, quite frankly, looks, my word, nobody else, is pitiful because he has lost one eye, he has glaucoma in the other eye, he wears sunglasses, he's much older, so he even looks different. Should that influence the jury? No. Might it? Don't know.
Okay, I got a question though. We've talked about this being a circumstantial case. We've talked about there being no DNA. What evidence do prosecutors have that this gentleman, I don't know if we should call him that if he truly did this, but this man is the murderer?
It's that he was at the location, close to the location, and part of the evidence that's really damning, in my opinion, for him is that he was out on bond when they arrested him for fondling or sexually touching a different 9-year-old child. And I think that you put those facts together, and the police at the time said, we have the right person.
But wait a second, though, Ashley. That information, and I actually didn't know that, that information, the jurors are never going to hear that about his previous crime, right?
Well, is that a similar transaction that should be admitted? I don't think so. Are they going to argue that it shouldn't? Perhaps it comes in. I don't know for sure. But I think my point is, at the time of the investigation 28 years ago, that was evidence that the investigators looked at to say, nobody knows where he was. He was around the location at the time. He had this prior offense. We must have the right guy. I really think that's the crux of the case.
Gosh, okay. Let's continue to listen to more of the victims, that 9-year-old girl's stepfather's testimony. Take a listen. So Jennifer Ann Lewis, the 9-year-old victim, you saw her picture there just a few seconds ago. She was found, her burned remains were found near that elementary school. And it's believed, according to the defendant, according to prosecutors, that the defendant, Stanley Liggins, strangled her to death. I want to bring in Ashley Willcott, who's been following this case very closely along with me here. Why are we going into the details exactly of the school and where the road was and all of that?
Because, again, the circumstantial evidence, as I understand it, based on testimony I've listened to, is that's where this defendant was in the area that he was in. And so they are trying to connect the dots to basically say there was no one else that did it. He was in proximity at the school, at the location. Here's what we found. He did it. And so it's imperative that they lay out the map of where everything is and where he was in relation to her body on the school grounds.
Well, what's amazing to me, based on the evidence that we've seen so far in this case, is that they did get a conviction. Not once, but twice in this case. It's going to be interesting, though, in 2018, as, folks have become a little bit more skeptical of police. Now, this is still Iowa, so it's different than, in more metropolitan cities. But whether we're going to have a different outcome to this case.
Right, and it's a very small community, small town feel, and a lot of people know each other, and that's true today, even it was as it was then. I don't know if that will make an impact or not. The other thing that's interesting, Rachel, is the jury will not know that there were 2 prior convictions and that those were overturned on appeal.
Very good point. Okay, we're going to continue to very closely monitor that case. It looks like I'm peering over there. They're on break, but when they're back, we'll have it on our site. In the meantime, the Kavanaugh hearings, they'll start up any minute now. Stay with us here on the Law&Crime Network. And welcome back, everybody, to the Law&Crime Network. Okay, we're going to turn now to the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation hearings that are underway in Washington, D.C. The senators are on a quick lunch recess, and then we're going to take you back live as they question Brett Kavanaugh about his views. An interesting turn of events, though, this morning when Cory Booker, a Democratic senator, said he was going to break the Senate rules in order to reveal what he termed confidential emails. We've been discussing this all day, but we just got some news that according to Fox News, Republicans are now saying the documents Democratic Senator Cory Booker published Thursday morning in supposed defiance of these rules had actually already been cleared for release. So they actually were not confidential emails. This thing is getting crazier by the second. Ashley, Willcott, did you hear the latest developments there?
I know, and it doesn't make any sense to me. Why hold it out as being confidential? And I'm going to go against Senate rules and make a really big deal of it when it had already been released. This hearing is getting crazier and crazier. It just doesn't make sense to me. And I think that they're all using it as their platform to get out there what they want to say, regardless of the point of a confirmation hearing.
And here's the exact quote from Senator John Cornyn, Republican of Texas. He says, all of the drama this morning apparently was for nothing and was quite unfortunate. Okay, let's replay you, in case you missed it, the drama from this morning when Senator Booker said he's breaking the rules and would be happy to be thrown out of the Senate. Take a listen. Okay, long story. That happened this morning. He released the emails. Nothing really earth-shattering. Apparently, Kavanaugh said he didn't believe in racial profiling in those emails. It wasn't shocking. However, what is kind of shocking in all of this is that apparently, according to Fox News, and this is breaking news, it just came out, the Republicans on the Judiciary Committee had already worked with the George W. Bush Library and the DOJ to clear the emails overnight. So Senator Booker was not violating any rules, apparently. So my question there is, you see that shot of Senator Booker and you see all of those senators sitting around the table. Why did not one of them say, oh, wait a second, Senator Booker, don't worry about it. Those emails are cleared. I don't get it. This is bizarre. Ashley Willcott.
Yeah, I don't get it either. I don't know what's going on. But I will say this. I wonder if the other senators also didn't know, or they got so caught up. And keep in mind, he didn't hand out the email. So nobody had any copy of the email, including Kavanaugh, that he is referencing. So no one may have really realized that they were ones that, in fact, had been cleared.
Yeah, I think there's some miscommunication going on. I don't know. People are grandstanding. This is getting to be a bit of a circus because we've been listening, and throughout all of this, we've been hearing those protesters interrupt the proceedings. I've watched many confirmation hearings and was actually in D.C. for John Roberts' confirmation hearing, and I don't remember anything like this ever happening with protesters actually interrupting the proceedings as they're going on.
No, I don't either. And not only that, but here's the other piece of it that's a little bit disturbing. If you look at precedent in terms of what questions have been asked of nominees in these confirmation hearings, they have not been asked, for instance, what's your position on Roe v. Wade? What's your position about this particular issue? How would you vote? Or ask questions to indicate how they would vote. And so in this case, they have. This is new. It's almost like a new era, and that includes the protesters who are protesting him because of decisions he's made in his past. Okay,
let's turn now to an important topic that the senators have been touching throughout the day yesterday and again today, and that is the question of whether Brett Kavanaugh played any role in implementing those torture policies. Take a listen to Senator Orrin Hatch questioning Kavanaugh about that.